Mill thought I was a pathetic divorcee and brought my ex to ruin my wedding even though I got a restraining order against him, and threatened legal action when we tried to cut contact with her. I, 38F, found love again with my wonderful husband, 34M, after a horrible 10-year-long relationship with my ex that ended in a lot of pain and heartbreak for me. I had honestly given up on love and relationships and expected myself to become a crazy cat lady when I met my husband at a friend's wedding. He was a friend of the groom. We met at the open bar and started talking, and that was it. We were basically stuck to each other for the whole evening. It was like some rom-com, and at the end of the night, when we finally said goodbye after exchanging numbers, I felt butterflies in my stomach after ages. We met again the very next day, and the rest is history. It has been almost 2 years since my friend's wedding, and every day with him has been a fairy tale. He proposed to me on our first anniversary, and in the last 6 months we planned our wedding and got married. My relationship is perfect for me. But there has always been one little, or not so little, problem. And by that, I mean my mother-in-law, MIL. My relationship with my mother-in-law, MIL, was rocky from day one. When I first met her, I could sense the disapproval radiating from her. It wasn't subtle either. She made it abundantly clear that she thought I wasn't good enough for her son. My husband is an only child, and his father passed away when he was just 16. So ever since then, it has just been him and his mother. Naturally, she is extremely protective of him and wants him to have the best things in life. And clearly, she didn't think that I was good enough. She had a problem with the fact that I am older than her son. She did not like the fact that I was divorced. At first, she didn't know that I was in an abusive relationship because that is something really personal to me, and I don't like talking about it to most people. According to her, divorced women cannot be trusted, and I was someone who couldn't possibly measure up to her standards. At first, I tried to brush off her comments, telling myself that she was just being protective of her son. But as time went on, her dislike for me only seemed to grow. Every family gathering became a battleground, with my Mill taking every opportunity to belittle me and undermine my relationship with my husband. Despite her constant negativity, I tried my best to keep the peace. After all, I loved my husband more than anything, and I didn't want to cause any unnecessary tension between him and his mother. But deep down, her words cut me to the core, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I would never truly be accepted by her. My husband has always been fiercely on my side. He has gotten into countless arguments in my defense and has threatened to cut her off if she doesn't improve her behavior towards him, but it has always been an endless repetitive cycle. My Mill makes a snarky comment or gives me the cold shoulder, my husband notices and speaks up, an argument follows, and after maybe a couple of days of silent treatment my Mill apologizes and is nice to me for a few weeks. It has been mentally exhausting, but my husband feels responsible for his mother, and I understood that she would always be a part of my life. Unfortunately, things got worse when he proposed to me. I guess she was hoping this was a random fling and that we would break up sooner or later. She even asked him if I was pregnant and said that even if I was, he didn't have to marry me. This is very unlike her because she is a traditional person who would never say something like this ordinarily. My husband actually thought she was joking at first and laughed it off. He asked her if he could have her wedding ring to propose to me, and she had a complete meltdown. She started the same old rant about me being used goods and unlucky, and my husband got so angry at her that he told her that I was abused in my last marriage and didn't deserve such cruelty over something that wasn't my fault. I guess he hoped that hearing about the abuse would make her change her mind about me and treat me more kindly. But it just backfired. She started saying things like how women like me lie about such things to get men in trouble, and he should be careful about trusting me. At that point he gave up any hope of her seeing reason and acting sane. At the end of the day, he just gave up and bought a new ring for me that he proposed with. I wasn't aware of this, and my husband only told me about this very recently, after our wedding. He apologized to me for speaking about my past in my absence. I didn't mind at all because I knew he was just trying to do his best for me, and that's all I cared about. From the engagement to the wedding, we purposefully avoided my Mill. My husband did see her a few times, but he made sure that I didn't come across her once. It went to the point where I actually noticed and asked him why he was not letting us meet at all, but he just brushed me aside, saying stuff like he didn't want her to upset me by saying something stupid as usual. That made sense to me. Now I know that he was protecting me from those ugly allegations. Fast forward to our wedding day. I had dreamed of this moment for as long as I could remember, walking down the aisle towards the man of my dreams, surrounded by our loved ones, ready to embark on a new chapter together. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. My wedding was an outdoor garden wedding, and there was unexpected rain in the morning, so I was really stressed from the beginning. The rain stopped by the afternoon and my lovely wedding planners managed to get the decor and everything in place, so I was finally starting to be less stressed about the day. I know that at almost 40 it shouldn't be such a big deal for me, but I just wanted to have my perfect day after all that my last marriage put me through. I walked down the aisle with my dad, and it was just like my dreams. I was the happiest bride and couldn't wait to say my vows. As I stood at the altar, my heart pounding with excitement and nerves, and we were just about to say our vows, I heard a very shocked "Oh my God" from behind me. It was my maid of honor Alana, who has been my closest friend for as long as I can remember. The moment I heard her, I could feel my stomach drop because I knew that something must be terribly wrong for her to interrupt the ceremony like that. I turned towards her and saw her glaring towards the guests, so I turned around to see what she was looking at. I don't think I can ever prepare myself for what I saw. It was my Mill making her grand entrance with an incredibly smug look on her face. She was with a man and was wearing an off-white lace dress. For a moment I thought that the white dress was what made Alana gasp like that, and I almost laughed because it was typical of her to pull a stunt like that, and it didn't even bother me. I was about to just around and resume the ceremony, but then I saw it. It wasn't my Mill's horribly timed entrance and her white dress that got that reaction, it was the person she was with. To my horror, she was accompanied by none other than Joseph. As in my abusive ex-husband Joseph, the man who had made my life a living hell for years. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. It took me a very long to get back to my normal life and fight the consequences of that marriage. Even now when I think about how I survived all those years, I feel sick. And it was my wedding day. I was finally starting the best chapter of my life and he was there again. I was simply terrified. For a moment I even forgot where I was. I felt like I had been transported back to the past and could not even see my actual surroundings. Alana could see what I was going through and came next to me and held my hand, and it was only then that I came back to reality. How could she do this to me? How could she bring him here, knowing the pain and trauma he had caused me? I wanted to scream, to run away and never look back. My husband was extremely concerned and kept asking me what was wrong, but I couldn't speak. In my confusion, I realized that even though he knew everything about my ex and my first marriage, he didn't know what Joseph actually looked like. But I was in no state to speak and just kept staring at my Mill blankly. I saw Alana say something to my husband, but I didn't hear what she said, and before I could do anything, my husband, my rock, sprang into action. He didn't hesitate for a second. With a determined look in his eyes, he marched over to his mother and my ex, and in a voice that brooked no argument, he told them to leave. It was like something out of a movie. The tension in the room was palpable, and I held my breath, waiting for what would happen next. My Mill of course refused to leave and said that she had a right to stay and watch her son getting married. He told her that he had been very patient with her so far, but she had taken things too far this time. He said that if she didn't leave immediately we would call the cops on her. She said that we can't do that because she had done nothing wrong. At that point, I felt actually sick and needed to sit down. My bridesmaids and my mom were doing all that they could to calm me down. I wasn't even aware of all the things that were happening there because I had to sit down and breathe. My bridesmaids were incredible and I'm so grateful to them for handling the situation in the best way possible. They're the ones who actually told me how things went down, because at that moment my head wasn't working. The only thing I could hear was my own heart beating faster than it has ever. The only part of the conversation I actually heard was what my husband did after that. He told my Mill that he would call the police on her for bringing someone I have a restraining order against near me, and that if she didn't want things to turn ugly then she should leave. It was my ex who spoke after that. I hadn't heard his voice in years, but the moment he spoke up I got literal chills down my spine. I felt like I was about to puke. My ex then said that the cops could not do anything because the restraining order I had against him had expired and the law couldn't do anything about it. The sinking feeling returned to my stomach. Somehow in the middle of the wedding planning and my new life, I had completely forgotten about that. My ex continued talking and told my husband he should be glad his mother was looking out for him by not letting him marry me because I would ruin his life just like I ruined his own. There were actual gasps from the guests. I couldn't believe what was happening to what was supposed to be the best day of my life. He tried to say something again, but before he could utter a single word, my husband literally ran over to where he was and punched him in the face. That was it. The whole ceremony just turned into utter chaos. My ex tried to hit my husband back and our groomsmen had to step in to defuse the situation. A lot of pushing around and shouting eventually resulted in my ex literally being thrown out of the venue. By that time someone had called security as well. My ex did not come back, but my Mill was still there. At that point it had been almost an hour since this whole drama started. In my head, I had accepted that my wedding was over and I wasn't getting married that day. I was at a stage where I wasn't even feeling sad, I was just numb. My bridesmaids had taken me inside and I was sitting in the dressing room alone because I had sent everyone away to get some breathing space. I was wondering what to do now when I heard a knock on the door and saw it was my husband. He asked me if he could come in and of course, I said yes. He sat down and apologized to me for everything that happened. He said that he should have been firmer with his mom from the very beginning and not let things come this far in the first place, and he asked me to forgive him. I couldn't believe this man. I was there blaming myself for everything that happened, and here he was asking for forgiveness. I broke down and we both started crying. After I was more stable I told him that he had nothing to apologize for. We just sat in silence for a while holding hands. After a while, he told me that he had asked the guests to leave and only our wedding party was there, and although it is not how we hoped things would be, he would want nothing more than to get married to me. I wasn't sure I could walk down the aisle again after what had happened, but looking at his hopeful face, I just couldn't say no. So I walked down the aisle to my best friend and biggest supporter. And this time we said our vows looking into each other's eyes without any interruptions and got married with only our closest friends as witnesses. After the ceremony, we danced and had a little intimate reception and donated all the leftover food. We came back to our home as man and wife for the first time, and all the bad things that happened to me seemed like a distant nightmare. We went on our honeymoon and didn't talk about the ceremony or my mill once. I tried to bring it up a few times, but my husband would not let me, saying that we shouldn't talk about such things during such happy times because they had already tried to sabotage our happiness once. I was curious but agreed with him. But throughout the honeymoon, he was acting kinda suspicious. Nothing major, but he took a lot of phone calls, and every time I would ask him who it was, he said work. This was unusual because his workplace has been really good with not bothering him on our vacations. We have gone on multiple trips before this. I asked him if there was any trouble, but he brushed me off, saying they're just busy and so he needed to help out a bit to make it easier. It still seemed weird to me, but I trusted him completely and focused on enjoying our time together. Our honeymoon was 2 weeks long and we got back a few days ago, and I just couldn't control my curiosity again. Yesterday I overheard my husband talk to someone on the phone and he sounded really agitated. So I asked him who it was and if everything was alright. He tried to brush it off at first, saying that it's just work stuff and I didn't have to worry about it, but I knew that he was hiding something and wouldn't quit bugging him before he told me what was going on. So that is how I found out that ever since the disaster on our wedding day, my husband has been secretly fighting a whole battle with my mill, trying to get her to leave us alone. I have already mentioned that we have had many arguments in the past where he has intervened on my behalf, but that failed to actually make my mill listen. So he decided to take things a step further this time and do something that made it clear that he is serious about not wanting her in our lives anymore. Apparently, he had told my mill at the wedding itself that she would never see him again, but she didn't take him seriously, of course, and kept calling him during our honeymoon until he had to literally block her from everything. But that didn't work either, because she kept calling his work every day to ask if he was there because he wasn't speaking to her. She pretended to be sick and said it was urgent, which made the receptionist at his job worriedly reach out to him even though he was on vacation. My husband knew that this was all just her creating drama to get his attention. She had faked being sick to get him to break no contact in the past as well. But this was the first time she had tried to get his work involved. My husband obviously didn't want his coworkers to find out about these things, so he had to unblock her and reach out. She was hysterical as expected and told him that she was extremely sick and needed him to come to her immediately. My husband told her that he didn't know her anything and never planned on seeing her again, but if she was actually sick then he could arrange for a nurse to stay with her for the time being. But he knew that there would be no need for this because there was no way she was actually sick. She threw another fit at that and said that she didn't want a stranger living with her when her own son was alive and well enough to do so. Let me just remind you all that she was fully aware that we were on our honeymoon. My husband lost his patience at that and said that if she couldn't accept what he was offering then there was nothing else he could do for her, and hung up on her. She wouldn't accept this, of course, and kept calling him relentlessly. But she would not stop calling. Things went to the point where my husband had to tell his secretary not to pick up her calls or take any of her messages anymore. It was around this time I noticed something was going on and confronted him. He was determined not to let her interrupt our honeymoon and upset me any further. So that very next morning he called her and let her know that if she didn't quit her drama, she could say goodbye to the idea of ever seeing him again, and told her not to call anymore. He hung up before she could say anything more. That seemed to work for the rest of our honeymoon, and she apparently did not call him again. But of course, nothing is as simple as that when it comes to her. She did wait until the honeymoon was over and we were back, and my husband thought that she had finally decided that she would leave us alone. He was wrong, of course. Apparently, she has become crazier than usual, and her lawyer reached out to my husband saying that if he does not start responding to her and include her in his life, she would have no choice but to file an elder abuse case against him for neglecting her during a time of serious illness. When he asked what this serious illness was, my mill's lawyer said that we were causing her mental trauma by cutting her off, which was affecting her blood pressure among other things. I couldn't believe this. Let me just make it clear that my mill does not have a record of any blood pressure related illnesses. This is nothing but a plot to make him feel guilty or just create enough of a scene to make him give up on the no contact thing. I know this, my husband knows this, and my mill definitely knows this, but of course, she would never admit it. The conversation I overheard my husband having yesterday was with his lawyer. Apparently, both my mill's lawyer and my husband's lawyer think that we should figure things out among ourselves instead of getting the courts involved. My husband's lawyer even said that even if we choose to fight this, it will be tedious, and family courts are usually soft on elders, and this would be little more than just a waste of time. So the easiest option seems to be us just sucking it up and my husband apologizing to my mill and breaking no contact. But he is still extremely upset over what happened at the wedding and doesn't want to just let it go and start over. We both know that this will just make my mill feel like she can continue to violate our boundaries and do whatever she wants with no consequences. My husband has been beating himself up over this and didn't want to tell me because he knew I would blame myself. He told me that he was okay with taking things to court and that if I didn't want us to be in contact with my mill we would never be, no matter what it took. So he has left it to me. I am extremely conflicted and don't know what to do. On one hand, I have not and will never forgive my mill for what she did at my wedding, and I don't think that I can just go back to pretending nothing ever happened and have her in my life again. But also I feel guilty about what my husband is going through and feel like I am being the cause of all these problems and drama. I have considered just telling him that I am comfortable with him having my mill in his life, but in my heart, I know that I will never feel safe around her again. Wibta for choosing to stay no contact with my mill even if it means legal and emotional complications for my husband. Update 1. I did not expect such overwhelming support for my little rant. I truly appreciate all the kindness I have received through comments and private messages sent by you guys. I haven't been able to reply to you all, but I am reading everything and it has given me a lot of clarity. Some of you suggested that my husband and I should just take my mill to court because since there are no actual medical records involved, she can't really prove that my husband and I have been neglecting her or causing her physical distress. I do agree with that and have considered that, but the whole issue here is that I don't want to be involved with lawyers and judges over what is essentially nothing but a tantrum being thrown by a grown woman. I have been talking to my husband and we are considering breaking no contact with my mill. We have gone over every possible scenario and at this point, I think it would just be simplest if my husband goes back to being in contact with her. Although we have decided that even if the two of them are on talking terms, it does not mean that I will be as well. I never want to see my mill again and I have made it clear. My husband agrees and he will make it clear to my mill that she is not allowed to visit our home or make any contact with me ever. I am not 100% happy with how things have turned out to be, but I guess there is nothing more I can do. The only thing I can say is that at least I won't have to deal with that woman again. I'm trying to be positive and see it as the silver lining in all this drama. Some of you have also asked if I am considering taking any action against my ex. Honestly, I think it is not worth it. I am sure it was my mill who reached out to him. I still don't know what she was trying to achieve there. Did she really think that my husband would leave me because my ex said I ruined lives? Maybe she was just trying to make me upset enough to back off from the wedding. I have spoken to my lawyer and she thinks it would be complicated to renew the restraining order because apart from the wedding, he has not done anything since the divorce, and even at the wedding it can be argued that he did not actively do something to harm me. More than all of that though, I don't want to see him ever again, and unless he tries to do something ever again, I just want to avoid him for as long as I can. Anyway, my husband is going to reach out to my mill and meet her. I hope she agrees to leave me out of it because if not, I don't know what we're supposed to do. Update 2. So things didn't go as well as we were hoping they would. I knew we were being too hopeful. My husband told him that he would be in contact with her and visit her regularly, but she wasn't welcome in our house anymore. My mill threw another tantrum at that and said that I was isolating her and that if he allows me to act this way then when we have kids I wouldn't let her see them and rob her of her grandchildren. My husband was honestly too amazed at how she jumped to those conclusions to even say anything. He told her the truth, that we hadn't even thought of having kids anytime soon and there was no point in basing this decision based on something that may not even happen for years. Of course, Mill wasn't happy with this and said that this was another way I was mentally abusing her and isolating her. My husband lost his temper at this and told her that none of this would have happened if she hadn't pulled that stunt at our wedding. My husband wouldn't tell me what she said about that, but after a lot of pleading, he told me that she said she was trying to show him the reality of what kind of a woman I was to protect him from marrying me. My husband lost his temper at that and walked out. He said that it doesn't matter what she does anymore and that we're done with her. We are prepared to waste our time and money at courts and on lawyers if it means that she won't be in our lives anymore. Update 3. I posted a couple of months ago about my crazy Mill sabotaging my wedding and then trying to blackmail me and my husband into forgetting everything she did and letting her back into our lives. I have an update about the situation if anyone is still interested. When my husband told my Mill that she should go ahead and call her lawyer, she thought he was bluffing and wouldn't really let things go that far. But we were serious, and the next time she tried to reach out to him, he told her to only contact us through our lawyer. That made her really offended and she started to show up at our house randomly to try and get a hold of him. It got to a point where I was scared of opening the door just in case I would see her standing there. It was not a pleasant situation, to say the least. My husband and I were talking about our options in this situation, and one particularly frustrating day I just told him that maybe we should move without telling her. I was not even serious when I said that, but the moment I did, we looked at each other and felt that it could really improve things for us. Thankfully we both have a good amount of savings so we could afford to move out to a rented place while the house was being seen by buyers. We contacted a realtor, put up a for sale sign, and moved almost overnight. We knew my Mill would see the sign and freak out. We settled into our tiny 2-bedroom without even unpacking much because we knew our house wouldn't be too hard to sell and started looking for a new place. Sure enough, 2 days into moving out our lawyer called us to say that she was being bombarded with questions. We told her to ignore them and tell my Mill that we would show up for any court dates, but she shouldn't expect to see either of us ever again. A few days into that situation, we were told that she was dropping any cases and wanted my husband to speak to her again. We might consider seeing her someday in the not so near future. For now, we're focusing on our marriage and finding a new place to start over. We're thinking of a condo with good building security to keep out any unwanted guests.